We just entered into Passion Week. We don't normally do this time of year. Typically, we get the stories that we're actually going to get over the next 3 weeks. We get those stories all shoved into a few days right before Easter. It's a little bit odd to do them now, but because we're reading through the whole Gospel of Mark together, we're now in Passion Week. And Mark, he takes a lot of time with this. So much has happened in the Gospel of Mark. It has covered years of Jesus's ministry. And all of a sudden, Mark goes from these huge, sweeping stories that happen back and forth across the land of Israel to spending an awful lot of time in one set of 3 or 4 days. All of a sudden, Mark goes from this grand sweeping action to very detailed conversations about who sat where and the words Jesus said at a particular dinner. When Mark does that, we pay attention because the details are so important. The irony is the details of this particular story, this woman who does something so extravagant, so luscious, so sensual, so outrageous, such a huge waste of money that it leads one of the 12 to finally snap and decide enough of this. Enough of this ridiculousness of Jesus. He is not the Messiah that I want. It causes him to snap and come out of hiding to go and betray Jesus. The irony is this beautiful story is about a woman who is never named. She has no, and yet Jesus says, what this woman has done, remembered forever. Why is that? What is it that she has done? We live in a world of trauma. There's so much conversation about trauma around us that we have experienced as children, that we experienced in our families and in our schools, the trauma that we experience living in a society that discriminates against people of color, that discriminates against bodies that don't match or act according to a male, typically white male way of being. We live in a world where we experience trauma every day. And when we experience trauma, what we do, we close in ourselves, right? We make a shell. We make a shell around ourselves to make sure that the trauma, which is always coming in from the outside, doesn't hurt us. Y'all can come on in. I see you back there. Willie, Calla, come on in. In Charlotte, I guess. But that's what we experience is trauma. This need to protect ourselves against a world that is always attacking us. And right now, trauma is something that we're talking a lot about. Part of that is we, by which I mean the world, has experienced the kind of collective trauma together, which is actually a little bit uncommon. Usually there are particular groups who experience trauma at the hands of other groups. But COVID has done something different. We are all afraid. We are literally afraid to go outside. We have spent 20 plus months living in our houses, not wanting to even see our friend and family. We're still wearing masks. as we should, because we're afraid that somebody somewhere is going to accidentally sneeze on us and we're going to get sick. And we're going to end up in the ICU on a ventilator and we're going to die. That's trauma. And we all thought maybe over the summer we'd kind of come out of that trauma, right? There was this moment when we were like, yes, we can have parties again and we can take our masks off, and then Delta happened. And I think the reality is we're moving into a world where we're just going to have to be a lot more careful about our health and what's passed back and forth. We just have to be careful. The world is changing. We're going to go back to whatever normal was. And that is traumatic. It's awful. It's not what we want. The disciples, Jesus, this woman, they've experienced an awful lot of trauma. Jesus is popular. So many people have come flooding to him, which feels awesome, right? Oh, rock star status, he loves Jesus. Except the problem is everybody does not love Jesus. There are some people who actually really hate him at this point because he is causing trouble. He is endangering the fragile balance between Rome and Israel by talking about what some people think of as violent revolution. And the Jews are known for violent revolution, and Rome is known for violently suppressing that revolution. Jesus is terrifying his own people. He's terrifying religious leaders who kind of know how it's done, right? We all know how church is done. We know how we're supposed to stand and sit and move. And Jesus is silly. Some of those things that you think are so important are actually not. What's important is whether you're giving water to those who are thirsty, food to those who are hungry, whether you're sitting and having compassionate and loving conversations with people in need. That is what matters. That is what loving God and neighbor means. So he's threatening people. And the disciples are in hiding at this point. I don't know if you noticed this sort of weird, they're gathered outside the city in Bethany, which is a small little village just outside of Jerusalem. And Jesus says, go in, find a guy carrying a water jar, which is not typical. Women carry water jars, men don't. Find a guy carrying a water jar, follow him along the road, and he's going to lead you to a door where there will be a room already prepared. This is classic behavior of a group of people who are in hiding. Jesus is now in hiding from people. And they're going to have their Passover dinner together in Jerusalem, in the city that holds the Holy of Holies, but they're not going to be very public about it. Okay? In Mark, right now, there's no entrance of Jesus on the back of a donkey. This story starts with people in hiding because they are afraid. They don't want to be caught. They know that the people are out to kill Jesus. And the thing that finally is going to make that happen, it happens at this first dinner where they come together and a woman comes and she does so outrageous that it makes one of those 12 angry enough to leave that meal, find the people who want to kill Jesus, promise to tell them where Jesus will be publicly available, and yet not so public that lots of people are going to watch this arrest, because it can't happen in the street. That would cause a backlash. What this was is so beautiful. We live trauma. And yet this woman decides, you know what? Right now, in this moment, in this space, I'm not going to live out of that fear. I'm not going to live out of that anxiety. In this moment, I'm going to take the most beautiful, wonderful, smelling, sensuous thing I have. and I'm going to pour it on Jesus. That pouring on Jesus is an act that any Jew would recognize, because time you get oil poured on you, and somebody says to you, you are worthy of leading us. You are worthy of being someone that we love. You are somebody who loves us so much. You are willing to be on our side. She takes a moment out of the anxiety and the fear, and she just does something ridiculously beautiful. How many of you like lotion that smells nice? How many put on body things that make us smell a little better than we might smell naturally? How many of you on occasion put on music you like? Just to listen to it. You just want to listen to the music. How many of you play music well or just because it's beautiful? How many of you sing along to a song? Hum a melody that you know because it just makes you feel better. I don't know about you, but I will on occasion put on one album and I will kind of listen to it for like 4 hours straight. Same album, just on repeat, because I just need what that particular is saying to me. I'm not a poet. I don't write poetry. I love to sing, not always well. We take time in our life to do things that are just beautiful. Sometimes I think we trivialize that by talking about self-care. Everyone needs to take some moments of self-care. But the reality is we need moments to enjoy the beauty of God's creation. In Oregon, we're blessed to go hiking almost all year round. Sometimes you need to put up your little Gore-Tex hood. Sometimes in the midst of all that is around us, we just need to enjoy the beauty of what is around us. When Jesus says the poor will always be with you, you can be kind to them at any time. He's not saying don't care. He's not saying ignore them, it's fate. What he's saying is in the midst of being kind to those around us, we need to enjoy what God has created. That's kind of why we do liturgy the way we do it here. There's lots of different ways to worship God, and all of them meet and connect people to God. Our particular tradition, we do it with candles. It's with times of silence. We pray together. We sing. They have shown that one of the best ways to handle trauma is actually to sing. Makes us breathe deep. It's one of the few times we actually breathe to the bottom of our diaphragm, which if you've ever done yoga, they're always telling you to breathe. That's what singing does, because to sing, you got to breathe. You got to fill this, and you got to support it. And your whole body vibrates. Singing connects our body to itself and to one another. Singing is one of the ways that we resist trauma. That is why so much of its movement was done in song, because song connects us together. You don't have to sing well, just sing. And so we sing. In this short time that we set aside on a Sunday, we sing. We light candles, we sit with purpose, we stand with purpose, we kneel with purpose. We move our bodies in ways that for many of us are so comfortable we've been doing it for years. Familiar. It's beautiful because we need beauty. We just need it. Do this in remembrance of me. I'm about to say those words, right? I'm going to lift the bread and I'm going to lift the cup and I'm going to say, do this in remembrance of me. What's interesting in the Gospel of Mark is that he gives those words of institution, that's what we call them. At the end of this story, he gives those words, but I don't know if you noticed, Mark didn't say everything that I say. What Mark said is, drink of this cup, eat of this bread. But the do this in remembrance of me part, Mark didn't put those in the words of Jesus over the bread and the wine. Mark put those words in the mouth of Jesus over the act of what this woman has done. We eat bread, drink wine, and we do it together because we believe that the presence of God in this bread and this wine transforms us to be the presence of God in the world around us. And we do it in remembrance of the beauty of God's creation in the midst of our trauma, in the midst of a world falling apart. We do it along with this woman, unnamed, whose act we remember every time we light a candle, every time we use the oil of chrism or the oil of anointment of the sick, which, by the way, you can have if you're not sick. I will be happy to anoint you with oil anytime you need a little bit of beauty in your life. We do it in remembrance of the reality that God is with us and calls us not to fear, not to anxiety, but to abundant, extravagant, excessive, outrageous beauty.